The cursor hovered over the send button, stark white against the soft glow of the laptop screen. Outside, the pre-dawn sky of Christmas morning held a bruised purple hue, hinting at the snow that hadn't quite fallen yet. Inside, the house was quiet, draped in the artificial cheer of twinkling lights and the faint, lingering scent of pine and cinnamon from last night. I could hear his soft, even breathing from the bedroom down the hall. He was dreaming, I supposed. Dreaming of the quiet, comfortable life he thought he still had. Dreaming of the woman he thought I was. My finger trembled just slightly. Not from doubt, but from the sheer weight of the moment. Years of swallowed tears, of forced smiles, of carefully constructed forgiveness, all of it distilled into this single, irreversible action. The house felt like a stage set, the perfect backdrop for the final scene. Christmas morning. A time for family, for gifts, for connection. And I was about to detonate a bomb right in the middle of it. The irony wasn't lost on me. It coated my tongue, sharp and bitter like unripe cranberries. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me more than you know. He'd always assumed I was the forgiving type. Maybe I had been once. A lifetime ago, before the slow erosion began. The first time had been like a punch to the gut. Unexpected, sickening. The careful lies, the flimsy excuses, the smell of cheap perfume that wasn't mine clinging to his shirts. I'd confronted him, shaking, tears streaming down my face. He'd crumbled or pretended to. Pleaded, promised, sworn on everything he held dear that it was a mistake, a one-time lapse, that I was the only one. And I, desperate to salvage the future we'd planned, the life we were building, I'd believed him. Or I'd wanted to believe him enough to try again. We went to therapy, we talked, we cried, we reconnected for a while. Things were better. The tension eased, the lies stopped being so obvious. I started to breathe again, telling myself the nightmare was over, that we'd come through stronger. That was my first mistake. The pattern, once established, is a difficult thing to break. It's like a worn path in the woods. You might try to forge a new one, hack through the undergrowth, but the old path is easier, familiar. And he was a creature of habit. The second time wasn't as dramatic. It was quieter, colder. A late-night text message notification I saw flash on his phone screen before he snatched it away. A name I didn't recognize. The way his eyes darted, the sudden defensiveness in his voice. This time, there were fewer tears, more ice in my veins. The confrontation was muted. He didn't beg. He seemed annoyed, like I was inconveniencing him. He twisted it, made me feel like I was being paranoid, controlling. He told me I was driving him away with my insecurity, and again, somehow, I found myself backing down, questioning my own sanity, burying the unease deep down. The therapist had talked about building trust, about letting go of suspicion. I'd tried. God, I'd tried so hard. It felt like trying to build a sandcastle against a rising tide. Each time, a little piece of me chipped away. My trust, my confidence, my sense of worth. I became a detective in my own home, scanning bills, checking mileage on his car, analyzing his mood, the tone of his voice. It was exhausting. It was demeaning. And he knew it. He thrived on the control, the knowledge that he could lie to my face, and I would either believe him or lack the strength to do anything about it. He had me in a box of his own making, the forgiving wife, the one who always took him back, the one who loved him too much to ever truly leave. He saw my love as a weakness, a leash he could tug whenever he wanted. The worst part wasn't the betrayal itself, not after the first raw shock wore off. It was the calculation behind it, the ease with which he lied, the way he looked me in the eye and spoke of his love, our future, while living a completely separate life. It was the ultimate disrespect. It told me he didn't just want to have affairs. He wanted to get away with it. He wanted to keep his comfortable home, his respectable image, and his secret life, all at my expense. He wanted the cake, and he wanted to eat it, too, and he expected me to keep baking it for him. I remember the exact moment the shift happened. It wasn't a sudden revelation, more like a slow crystallization of ice in my soul. It was about 6 months ago. I'd found definitive proof, not a text message, not a stray scent, but something concrete, something undeniable that showed not just a casual encounter, but an ongoing, planned relationship. It was late at night. He was asleep, snoring softly beside me. The moonlight painted stripes across the bed. I held the proof in my hand, staring at his sleeping face. And for the first time, I didn't feel heartbreak. I felt still. Utterly, completely still. The storm of emotion I'd expected didn't come. Instead, there was a cold, hard calm. In that silence, a new thought formed, sharp and clear. It wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't about fixing him, or us, or the marriage.
It was about me.
About the woman I had become. The one who lived in constant anxiety, who doubted her own perceptions, whose life was being dictated by someone else's lies. And I realized I couldn't do it anymore. The forgiving wife was dead. She had been suffocated slowly, lovingly, by his repeated betrayals. But the new woman, she wasn't weak. She was just quiet. She watched. She listened. She learned. From that night on, I started planning. The first step was securing my financial independence. He controlled most of our assets, the house, the investments. He'd always handled everything, saying I didn't need to worry my pretty little head about money. It sounded charming at first, protective. Now I saw it for what it was, control. Quietly, painstakingly, I started gathering information. Account numbers, passwords he'd carelessly left lying around, property deeds. I opened a separate bank account, a small one at first, siphoning off tiny amounts from the joint accounts, selling little-used items online. It felt illicit, thrilling in a terrifying way. Every saved dollar felt like a brick in the wall I was building around myself. I spent hours online, researching divorce laws, reading forums, learning about asset division and spousal support. I read stories of women who had been left with nothing, who had trusted the wrong person. Their cautionary tales became my textbooks. I learned about forensic accounting, about discovering hidden assets. The phrase, paper trails more powerful than emotions, became my mantra. Emotions were a luxury I couldn't afford right now. This was a war, and I needed to be strategic. Finding a lawyer was the hardest part. I couldn't just ask friends for recommendations. I needed someone discreet, someone sharp, someone who understood complex financial situations and, crucially, someone who wouldn't flinch when I told them the full, sordid story. I made secret calls from burner phones I bought at convenience stores, using cash. I scheduled initial consultations during times he was supposedly at work, inventing elaborate excuses for my absence, dentist appointments, yoga retreats I never went to, visiting a sick relative who didn't exist. The first lawyer I met was kind, but too soft. She talked about mediation, about amicable splits. I knew instinctively that wouldn't work. He would fight dirty. He wouldn't let me walk away easily, especially if he thought I was going to take what he considered his. The second one, Sarah, was perfect. She had eyes like chips of ice and a reputation for being utterly ruthless in court. I sat in her sterile office, the city lights a cold backdrop outside her window, and told her everything. I laid out the evidence I had already collected, the printed emails, the suspicious bank transfers, the phone records I'd managed to access. As I spoke, detailing the years of manipulation and deceit, I expected to feel shame or sadness. Instead, I felt a surge of cold power. This wasn't just my story anymore, it was evidence. Sarah listened without interruption, her face impassive. When I finished, she leaned forward. "You've done your homework," she said, her voice low and gravelly. "Most people come to me broken with nothing. You came with a strategy. You came prepared." That felt like the true turning point. Validation. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was an opponent. We worked in secret for months, building the case file, tracing hidden accounts, gathering more evidence. The deeper we dug, the clearer the picture became. His affairs weren't just sporadic mistakes. They were a constant feature of his life, a parallel existence he carefully maintained. There were multiple women, overlapping timelines, money siphoned off to support them, gifts bought with our money. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a con artist, living a lie for years, maybe decades. He'd built his entire life, our life, on a foundation of deceit. The anger I felt wasn't hot and explosive. It was a cold, simmering rage that fueled my determination. Every piece of evidence I uncovered felt like a small victory, a chip in his carefully constructed facade. I felt like a mole, burrowing beneath his perfect lawn, preparing to collapse it from below. Living with him during this time was the ultimate test of my self-control. I maintained the facade of the loving, trusting wife. I cooked his favorite meals, listened to his day, smiled at his jokes. Inside, I was a block of ice, observing him with clinical detachment. Every time he lied, every time he touched me, every time he spoke about our future, I added it to my mental ledger. He had no idea. He thought I was still naive, still easily fooled. His arrogance was breathtaking. He'd grown so complacent in his deceit, so certain of my passive acceptance, that he never saw it coming. He had poisoned the well of our marriage beyond repair, and now I was going to make him drink it. The idea of Christmas morning came to me later, as the plan solidified. Sarah had everything ready. The papers were drafted, filed, ready to be served. We just needed the right moment. A quiet day, a time when he was relaxed, vulnerable, surrounded by the symbols of the life he'd so casually defiled. Christmas. It was perfect. The ultimate contrast. Joy and devastation. Peace and war. He expected warmth, gifts, the usual comfortable routine. He expected me to be there, his reliable, forgiving wife, anchoring his world while he secretly drifted wherever he pleased. I would give him a gift, all right. The gift of facing the consequences of his actions, served cold, on a silver platter of holiday cheer. Sarah had advised against it. She'd said it was unnecessarily cruel, that it might backfire in court, make me look vindictive. But this wasn't just about legal strategy anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my agency. It was about showing him that I was not a doormat, that his actions had consequences, and that the woman he had broken had rebuilt herself into something he wouldn't recognize. It was about timing, hitting him when he was utterly blindsided, taking away his ability to prepare, to spin, to lie his way out of it. Christmas morning would strip him bare. So here I was. The house was quiet. The tree lights glowed softly in the living room, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The air smelled faintly of coffee I'd just brewed, a small comfort in the sterile environment of my makeshift office. The laptop screen was the only source of bright light. My finger hovered. One click. That was all it would take. I thought of the years. The good years. The genuinely happy moments that now felt tainted, like finding mold on old photographs. I thought of the pain. The nights I'd cried silently into my pillow, so he wouldn't hear. I thought of the strength it had taken to pull myself out of the quicksand of despair and start building something new in secret. All of it led to this cursor, this button. The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, sending a weak, pale light through the window. The house was still silent, holding its breath. My finger pressed down. Click. The email was sent. Subject line: regarding our future attachment. The divorce petition. The legal documents, the demands for asset division, the details of what I knew laid bare in cold, formal language. It was done. The quiet click of the mouse was the sound of a door slamming shut on one life and the hesitant creak of another opening. I closed the laptop, the screen going dark. The silence felt different now, heavier, charged with anticipation. I sat there for a long moment just breathing, taking in the scent of coffee, the sight of the quiet room, the feeling of the cool wooden desk beneath my hands. It was a strange sort of peace, laced with adrenaline. The calm before the storm. I didn't have to wait long. I went into the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee. The house remained still. He was probably just waking up, checking his phone, maybe sending a few hushed Merry Christmas texts to his various mistresses. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. He had no idea the kind of message waiting for him. I heard the floorboards creak overhead. He was up. The toilet flushed. The shower turned on, then off. The sounds of his usual morning routine. My heart started to beat a little faster, a nervous flutter in my chest. Not fear, exactly. More like the tense readiness before a performance. He came into the kitchen about 20 minutes later, dressed in his bathrobe, hair damp. He looked relaxed, sleepy, wearing the complacent smile he always wore when he thought everything was right with his world. "Merry Christmas, sleepyhead," I said, my voice carefully neutral, maybe even a little warm. I handed him his coffee, the mug warm against his hand. "Merry Christmas," he mumbled, taking a sip. He walked over to the island, picked up his phone which he'd left charging. He scrolled through notifications, smiling faintly at something. Then his thumb paused. His brow furrowed. He clicked on something. I watched his face. It was like watching a landscape change under a sudden, violent weather shift. The faint smile vanished. His eyes widened, scanning the screen frantically. The color drained from his face, leaving it pasty and slack. His mouth fell open slightly. The coffee mug trembled in his hand. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with shock, disbelief, and a dawning horror. What is this?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. I met his gaze, keeping my own expression calm, empty of emotion. "It's what you think it is," I said softly. "Divorce papers." He stared at me, uncomprehending. "But why? Now? Christmas. Why not?" I countered, my voice still quiet. It seemed like the right time. The quiet shock lasted only a moment. Then the storm broke. It wasn't a controlled release of anger. It was a complete collapse. He started shouting, the quiet house suddenly filled with sound. "Divorce? Are you insane? What the hell is this? You can't do this. Not now. Not like this." He slammed the mug down on the island. Coffee sloshed over the rim. He was shaking, not with cold, but with pure, unadulterated rage and panic. "I can," I said, my voice still steady, a strange contrast to his spiraling hysteria. "I just did. But I thought we were fine. We're married. You always," he trailed off, grasping for the old narrative, the one where I always forgave him. "Thought I'd forgive you again?" I finished for him, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen through a long-running lie. "No. Not this time. You set this up. You planned this," he yelled, his voice rising, cracking with desperation. He was finally seeing it, the trap he'd walked into, the months of quiet preparation he'd never suspected. "You think I just woke up this morning and decided to send you divorce papers on Christmas?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "This has been a long time coming. You built this, piece by piece, lie by lie. You witch. You cold-hearted bitch," he screamed, taking a step towards me. I didn't flinch. "Careful," I said, my voice dropping slightly, gaining a new, hard edge. "You might want to read the attachments carefully before you start throwing around accusations. Sarah is very thorough. We have everything." That stopped him dead in his tracks. The mention of my lawyer, the implied threat of the evidence I possessed, the clear understanding that this wasn't just an emotional outburst he could talk his way out of. This was legal, prepared, and backed by proof. His face twisted, the panic warring with fury. He looked completely, utterly blindsided. He thought he was invulnerable, that my love was his shield against consequences. He was wrong. "You wouldn't dare," he snarled, but there was a tremor in his voice. "I just did," I repeated. "And this is just the beginning. You can cooperate, or you can make this very, very public. The choice is yours." He screamed then. A raw, guttural sound of pure agony and defeat. It wasn't the sound of a man in pain, but a cornered animal, realizing the escape routes were cut off. He grabbed the mug he'd slammed down, raising it as if to throw it, then dropped it onto the floor instead. Ceramic shattered everywhere, coffee splashed across the clean tiles, dark and ugly. He clutched his head with both hands, pacing back and forth in the small space, muttering incoherently. He hadn't expected a fight. He'd expected tears, pleading, maybe a dramatic scene he could manage. He hadn't expected silence, cold resolve, and a stack of legal documents served on the one morning of the year dedicated to peace and goodwill. He had underestimated me completely. He had mistaken my capacity for forgiveness for weakness. He hadn't realized that sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous, especially when they've had enough time to watch and learn and plan. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. I couldn't tell if he was crying or just vibrating with impotent rage. I didn't feel any pity, just a vast, empty space where emotion used to be. The quiet hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. The distant sounds of Christmas music from a neighbor's house felt alien and intrusive. I walked over to the counter, picked up my coffee mug. I didn't say anything. There was nothing left to say. The message had been delivered. The game was over. And I had won. Not in a triumphant, joyful way. Winning felt quiet.
Exhausting.
Like reaching the summit of a mountain after a brutal, endless climb, only to find the view was just mist and cold air. I looked at the shattered ceramic and spilled coffee on the floor. It was a mess, yes. But it was his mess. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't my job to clean it up. I stepped carefully around it, walking out of the kitchen, leaving him there amidst the wreckage he'd created. I went back to my makeshift office, closed the door softly behind me. The house felt different. Lighter, somehow. The air less heavy with unspoken lies. The Christmas tree in the living room still twinkled, oblivious to the storm that had just passed through the kitchen. It was Christmas morning, and I was finally free. The quiet that settled over the house after his initial outburst was profound. He stayed in the kitchen for a long time, sometimes pacing, sometimes slumped in the chair. I stayed in my room, the door closed, the sound of his misery a dull thrumming through the walls. It wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't painful either. It was just noise. The final, sputtering sounds of a life I was leaving behind. I sat by the window, watching the first snowflakes begin to fall. They drifted down slowly, silently, covering the world in a pristine white blanket. It felt symbolic. A fresh start, a clean slate. But I knew that underneath the snow, the old ground was still there, frozen and hard. The past doesn't disappear just because you cover it up. You have to dig through it, break it apart, clear it away to build something new. The planning hadn't just been about the legal strategy, about securing assets and gathering evidence. It had also been about preparing myself, about building an inner resilience, a core of steel he couldn't chip away at. I had spent months shedding the skin of the woman who was easily hurt, easily controlled, easily forgiving. I had to become someone else, someone who could face him without flinching, who could deliver the final blow without hesitation. It felt strange, this new skin. Colder, less yielding. Was this who I was now? A strategist, a quiet warrior, someone who could plan and execute a devastating emotional attack. Maybe. Or maybe it was just the armor I needed to wear to get through this war. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to fix things, trying to fix him. The emotional labor, the sleepless nights, the endless cycle of hope and disappointment. It felt like a waste. A terrible, heartbreaking waste of my time, my energy, my love. He hadn't deserved it. He had taken it for granted, trampled on it, used it against me. And the most painful realization wasn't his betrayal, but my own complicity in letting it happen for so long. My fear of being alone, my belief that a broken marriage was better than no marriage, my desperate clinging to a fantasy that had died years ago. That was the real tragedy. But now I was choosing a different path. A path towards self-respect, towards reclaiming my life. It wouldn't be easy. Divorce is messy, painful, even when you're the one initiating it. There would be legal battles, financial arguments, the awkward division of possessions, the questions from friends and family. He would likely try to make my life hell, to paint me as the villain. But I was ready. I had faced down my greatest fear, losing the life I thought I wanted, and found that the alternative wasn't terrifying emptiness, but the quiet possibility of building something real. The silence from the kitchen finally broke when I heard the front door open and close. He was leaving. I didn't move. I didn't call out. I just listened to the sound of his car starting, the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway as he drove away. Driving away from the shattered coffee mug, from the ruined Christmas morning, from the woman he'd thought he knew. I wondered where he was going. To one of his mistresses? To a lawyer? To just drive around, reeling from the shock? It didn't matter. His destination wasn't my concern anymore. The house was truly quiet now. Empty except for me. The silence was vast, a little lonely, but also full of potential. It wasn't the oppressive silence of secrets and lies. It was the open silence of possibility. I got up, stretched. My body ached with tension I hadn't realized I was holding. I walked back into the kitchen. The broken mug and spilled coffee were still there, a stark reminder of the morning's drama. I looked at it for a moment, then went to get a broom and dustpan. This wasn't his mess anymore. It was just a mess, and I could clean it up. As I swept the shards into the dustpan, carefully, methodically, I thought about the years. The years of walking on eggshells, of ignoring red flags, of making excuses for his behavior. The years of trying to be the good wife, the forgiving wife, the wife who didn't make waves. I had been so focused on preserving the appearance of a perfect life that I had allowed my real life to become a lie. But not anymore. The woman sweeping up broken ceramic on Christmas morning was not the same woman who had married him all those years ago. She was scarred, yes, and perhaps a little hardened. But she was also stronger, clear-eyed, and finally, free. The snow continued to fall outside, soft and silent. It would be a white Christmas after all. Not a traditional, cozy one, but a white Christmas marking the end of one story and the uncertain, quiet beginning of another. The future was a blank page, waiting to be written. There was fear, of course. Uncertainty. But beneath that, a bedrock of quiet confidence. I had survived. I had fought back. And I was still standing. If this story hit close to home, I'd love to hear your version. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.